Hello and welcome to part 3. Wow, part 3 of Journey of Loss and Love. I'm David St.Martin.
I'm Michelle St.Martin.
I said this last week, but I'm really overwhelmed with the amount of DMs that we're getting through people that have experienced elements of what we went through. So last week we went through the loss of miscarriages, ectopic pregnancies, failed IVFs, and so many people who are in our circles, but we never realised just how much they personally suffered.
Exactly, and that's when you start talking about it. It does make people reach out and talk about their own personal stories that they've gone through and all their heartache. And before doing this, I thought to myself, well, 9 babies to lose, I don't know anybody that's lost that amount of babies in my circle of connections and people that I know and their friends. And then I received a message from somebody that actually have gone through more than that. So the reason we've done this is to help people and to bring people out to talk about it, and especially for myself and David, to be there for them and go through our journey with them and just give them that support and love. So I'm really glad and touched that we've been able to help people. So it's
definitely
made it worthwhile, hasn't it,
Jim? It has. So I'm just a bit taken aback. Are we wearing the same shirts?
We are, but I think I'm wearing it better, guys. What do you think? Who's wearing it better?
Oh my
God.
David. Look, I know we've been together a long time, but
lounge Sunday wear.
This is my best shirt.
This is my best shirt.
So today we talk about the adoption journey, and so we talk about kind of our journey. And bearing in mind now, this was a number of years ago. So we were successful just under 9 years ago through adopting our son. But the process before that took about 3.5 years. So, this for us has been, a long journey, 11, 12 years now. So lots have changed. I need to make that crystal clear now. A lot has changed in terms of the way the process works.
They've made it easier, haven't they?
Much easier, because it was identified that it just took too long when you had loving couples that wanted to go through this journey to adopt, and naturally everything has to be done correctly. All the due diligence has to be done, because we're talking about a life now, and
they can't get it wrong.
They can't afford to get it wrong. And there's been too many horror stories where they have got it wrong as a system. So what we talk about here is what we went through, but it's a lot more fluid now as well. So should we start off with stage 1?
Yeah. The
exploration stage. So I'll let you talk a little bit more about this, but this for us was, Michelle and I already decided that we wanted to go through the adoption process.
We did.
And but how did we get to that stage? What were we doing?
I can't remember exactly what we were doing when we decided to go through it. I think it was more, you could see how torn apart I was through all the miscarriages and losing all them babies. I was absolutely broken, as I've mentioned in my previous video, and it tore me apart, and I didn't think I had the strength to go on with anything at that point. But luckily I've got a really supportive husband, and I think it was yourself that talked me into going through the adoption route with your kind nature and words and what it would bring to us as a couple. And at that point I realised that it was the right thing to do. And then we decided to make that phone call to our local authority, and that's who we went through. It's really important that you look into your local authorities, adoption agencies that you... we decided to go for our local authority because that's what we wanted to do. But there's so many routes of adoption, so it's really important as a couple you sit down and go through this and talk about your heartache, what you've gone through, and you're really sure. And remember that once you've gone through the adoption route, some women naturally fall pregnant again. Some women might try and have IVF again and it works, but when you go through the adoption route, it's really important that it's right for you at the time, and you've got to talk to your partner, get it right, do all your research, and then make the call. That's what we done, wasn't it? Yeah,
and also we had a couple of friends that had gone through it as well.
Yeah.
I mean, they had adopted for years and years ago, and again, we weren't aware. But again, just talking to your circle, you kind of get an idea on kind of who's gone through this. So I would just say, talk to as many people as you can. There's going to be lots of forums you can join. A ton of great forums, and I'll try and tag some of them in this post, but a ton of great forums. And listen, just pre-adoption thoughts, talk to people, find out their challenges, find out, and again, utilize us as well, but find out the good, the bad, and ugly, because there were lots of challenging times, even before we went through to get to the approval stage. So stage 1 is all about exploration. Dig deep, do your research. Because again, yes, it's about having a child and a family, but this is about raising a human being. Stage 1, the official stage 1, is the initial checks and the registration with either the local authority or the adoption agency. So it seems quite formal, the formal evaluation process, but again, it has to be. So stage 1 really is the registration. So you submit your interest to, in our case, the local authority, and that they ask, understandably, lots of questions. So let's talk about your family. Where are you at right now? How long have you been together? What's your income, your occupation? What happens if you're both working? Suddenly one decides to stay at home with the child. What do you then do with the income to replace that? So, it's quite...
It's very detailed.
It's very detailed. I wouldn't say deep, but it's definitely detailed because, again...
It gets deep though, doesn't it?
It gets very deep. We're going to touch into that as well. So, and at that point, they then look at references. So they'll take up kind of 3 references as well. They'll look at doing a DBS check, so a criminal check as well. So all the due diligence, all the before we even get into this, we just, from an agency point of view or local authority point of view, need to make sure that there's nothing untoward underlining at the very start of the process. Thankfully, big tick for us. We was okay. But so when you then go and you've started the process, you have a preparation group. And this typically, the process for us...
First of all, actually, they invited us to the local council. They had
forgot about
meeting group, didn't they? Where they invite you couples in, just if you're registered in interest to go in. Then there's somebody there from the local authorities talking about the purpose of adoption, the good, the bad, the ugly. So you get an understanding of it actually before you start the process. So we sat there for a couple of hours.
Yeah, there was about, I think, 40, 50 couples.
Yeah, there might have been a bit more. It was packed. It was really busy. And again, even at that point, you think, my goodness me, I didn't think all these people were going through the same journey, the same thoughts that we were having, but you'll be surprised. You could just look at somebody across the road from you and they could be going through the same thing. So you definitely don't take anything for granted.
No, you definitely don't. So again, look at that as your kind of pre-exploration stage. So if there's going to be an open evening for either an agency or local authority, definitely go and attend, because that will give you... It'll give you a chance to...
It's a good insight, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But it'll give you a chance to really ask a ton of questions that you may have as well. So at this stage now, we're at the preparation group. Now, within this group, there were 9 couples in this group. And so day 1 is all very nice teas and donuts. And, we're all sitting there and we openly start talking about our own... challenges as to why we're there, why we're looking to adopt.
In front of people that we've never met
at all. And so again, it's for us, it's quite warming to know that there's other couples that have either gone through the same or similar experiences, or people that have just said, no, not even going to try for a child, we're just going to go and adopt straight away. So that was quite heartwarming. So day 1 was pretty it was fun. Getting lots of insight and information.
Getting used to people, wasn't it? I think they've done that really just so that people could get familiarised with the other couples that were there, so making it a bit more comfortable, I would say.
Definitely. Day 2, though, got deep.
Really deep.
So, you have all your breakout sessions and a ton of flip charts and loads of notes. And what was key for the assessors is to see how we then respond to opening up. So are we going to be a closed book and I'm not going to open up and we're just going to, just be kind of rigid? Because that then proves, well, actually, this is the start of a really long process. And this process could be, in our case, it took a long time. But typically now the process, it could be around kind of 6 to 7 months. Could be sooner, could be longer, depends on everything in between. So if you're then not opening up to the assessors, then that says probably how it's going to be hard for them to really get information from you. And so I remember day 2, and it got deep to a stage where I cried.
I think, yeah,
I
most
bawled
people did, yeah.
because I like to tap into so deep into stuff that I'd gone through, and I've had a really blessed life, but I had to dig deep in stuff that I'd buried, and that was it. The uncontrollable tears that just flow through, and I'm like, I'm in front of complete strangers. Like this isn't right. But we got through day 2. Day 3 was interesting because out of the 9 couples, only 3 remained, and that says a lot about why they do this.
They have to do it, yeah. It really does. So when we turned up on the 3rd day, there was ourselves and another 2 couples that were there. So that was the 3 of us, 3 lots of couples that remained in the process. Because when David was talking about day 2, how deep they got, it does bring it home actually what they're going to talk to you about when they start the process, and you have to dig deep from even when you was a child. So whether you've had a good, bad, ugly, happy childhood, you have to talk about that.
It's intrusive.
Very. I mean, it was really hard for
Yeah,
me.
really intrusive. And I think it's, at the time, so I remember leaving day 2 thinking, why do you need to know that? Why did you have to go so deep? You know, like, go deep. Like,
Yeah.
I understand, but go deep with me, you, and Michelle. Like, the 3 of us. Don't go deep in front of complete strangers that I'm never going to see again, or potentially never going to see again.
But then
so
you realise why they have to
realise
do
why,
it.
and it's not taking the strong and the weak. It's just, listen, this is how it's going to be. So that was an eye opener. And so day 3 and day 4 we finish up. So again, this is probably going to be condensed, I guess, in 2 days now with some of the way that they work.
But they brought people in as well. So during that workshop that we attended, they brought people in. So they brought in somebody that's been adopted. They brought, I can't remember the lady's name, but not that we'd give her name, but they did bring somebody in, and they just talk about their journey, which was really lovely. It just gives you an insight of what people go through. And I think the workshop, although it was really tough, it was at the same time really beautiful, wasn't it? I think because it just makes you realise how strong you are. If you can sit there and talk about that, and you can stick that out, then you're strong enough to go through this process at the end of it. And trust me when I say it was worth every second. I actually wouldn't change anything about it, because I'm so glad we've done it, and it made us such a stronger couple, didn't it? And even with the friends that we'd made there, it just brings it all together. So I think it's really worth that workshop.
100%.
Yeah.
So then we go into stage 2. So there's only 487 stages, so don't worry about it.
Yeah,
There's only 3. But stage 2 was then the training and assessment. So at this point, typically you'd look at working with a social worker, and this is where they really go through. Oh, excuse me, I'm going to knock that out. This really goes through the strength and your case as a couple, and be prepared. Everything, there's no hiding at all. So if you feel, so you do a chronological breakdown of your life. So individuals, and then obviously coming together as a couple, moving up, and everything. So from schooling through to young adult, adulthood,
Your
parents,
your sisters, your friends,
any adversity
siblings,
you've endured, how you've overcome that, what support group you're in, like everything. And it was, so it took us, again, now typically it's 6 months or so,
4 years that
but
process.
it was 3.5 years the process, but within that we had a wobble at about kind of year 2.5, just because it was just going on so long. And I'm not going to go.
We've gone through the hard part.
We'd already gone through the hard part, but as I said, a lot's changed since then. So I don't want to go too much about it taking us as long as that, because it could. it would feel off-putting if I said to you now, look, you want a child,
Yeah.
you've sat down as a couple, you really want to move ahead, but actually it's going to take you 4 years.
It's
A
not
lot
like that.
a lot of people could go, it's not for me. However, let's be fair. If you're going to then go, well, I want this type of child, this type of demographic, and it's such a small window, then
It could take that long.
it could take that long. But then why would you want to adopt?
Yeah,
You got to
sure.
you got to realise the reason for adoption isn't to have this perfect child, because we all know no child is perfect.
But also they do, when you go for adoption, the matching process actually that you go through when they match yourselves, that's why they do the chronological stage. So they go through you as a couple, your family, and the matching process. That's why they do it, because they get it. They do get it right. I know they definitely got it.
You're jumping ahead now to stage 3.
But they got it right for us.
They did in the end. So, but just to finish off stage 2 is once you've gone through everything from with your social worker, and look, the relationship you have with your social worker has to be solid. And
Definitely.
one thing I'd say, and this is from what we've learned, if you feel that relationship isn't there, you as a couple need to ask reasons why, questions why. Is it just, look, it's new to me, I'm not too sure how to handle it, but we'll carry on. If the energy between you as a unit, so social worker and you as a couple, isn't right, you might have to try and change it up.
Yeah, definitely, I would agree. Actually, I think once you meet your social worker for the first time, it's really important to have that connection with them.
But
and if there's things that you need to say to them, then say it, because it's got to be an open book.
100%.
You've got a long journey together, a long journey to go through everything. So it's really important that that connection's there.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
You've got to be completely open. And then at the end of that very, very challenging, deep, intrusive period of time, which we know is worth it in the end, but you, as a couple, you have to, every time you have a social worker visit, and we done this, we literally took ourselves, when the door shut, we just sat down, kettle on, and for 30, 40 minutes just spoke about that session. Could we have said anything differently? Were we as open as we could have been? Just because if you as a couple are not communicating and knowing that this is a process where you're both coming together, it may be a bit more of a challenge. So at the end of that, we then went through the adoption panel. And so what the social worker does is he puts together this beautifully packaged profile on us, and what we're looking for, the child needs, how we can, and look, even at this stage we have to, I'm jumping to and from, but we have to look at, when we want a child, what type of child can we offer, and there'll be some really tough questions around what can you handle.
Yeah, it was tough. And you really have to be honest. So if you feel that you can't, say that. Don't feel that there's so many children, and trust me, I know that if I could have taken all the profiles that we'd seen, I would have done, and it's heartbreaking. If it's not the right match for you when you read the profile, then it's not the right match. Please, please, please note that. You can't just look at a profile and think, oh, that the child needs somebody. It's not like that. It's got to be right. And that was, for me, for the whole adoption process, that was the toughest decisions. And although that's really hard, that's what we felt, wasn't it?
Really,
and we cried. I think, some of the profiles we'd seen, it brought tears to us because, it weren't just quite right for us.
And this is now the final stage, which is matching the child to your needs. And if you've been open and honest with your social worker's been honest and open with you, it makes it a lot easier.
It really does.
But it's that suitability check, and Michelle said it's really difficult because we didn't see lots and lots and lots of profiles, but the profiles that we saw. So, for example, we said, look, could we take on a child with severe disability needs? And based on the fact that and I'm going to be honest now, we're brand new parents, never had any experience of looking after children with severe disabilities, having to say no, that's a child, or the needs of a child that we couldn't necessarily nurture, That's really difficult.
It was heartbreaking.
Having to say, look, but this is a human being.
Because we could have had a birth child that could have been born with disabilities.
Yeah.
So that's a thing, and we would have loved it just the same. So it's a really, really tough, and even now talking about it, it actually just makes me want to burst into tears, because we could have had a child that could have been born with disabilities, and it doesn't matter. A disability is a disability, and I think they do ask you that, and there were questions where we said yes.
Mm-hmm.
We would have considered a disability, but I think when they talk about children with a severe disability, if you've got no experience with that, and the child may be 3, 4, 5 years of age, then I think that's where we felt it might have been a bit difficult for us.
That's where we fell short. And so the suitability side, that's really when it went on for some time, and based on, and we'll be honest in terms of the needs that we had, I think it's important for them to know. So we said between 0 and 2.5. So between birth and 2.5 years old is the bracket that we'd be looking for. Now we've lived a long life since adopting our son just shy of 9 years ago. On reflection, of course we'd change that. We'd probably go 0 to 5, because at the time we didn't have experience of knowing that.
But also for me, the reason why I wanted to go for a younger child is because I'd lost so many babies, and I wanted that nurture. I wanted to be able to go through that nurture thing, and it might sound really silly, but just to be able to change a nappy, just to be able to take them off of a bottle onto food, and introduce all of them things that I really wanted to do as a mother. That's something that I always wanted. I'd always wanted to be able to breastfeed my baby and have it born on me. So them things were really important, and I think as we've obviously got older now, obviously that need will be different, because we did get a smaller child, and we were really blessed and lucky to be able to have that. But that's honesty, and that's being really honest with your social worker team, the people around you, that that you have to get it right. And because we had gone through that, that's why we decided to go for a younger child, wasn't it? Because I wanted to be able to at least experience some of those young early stages of motherhood. I'm really lucky that we were able to do that.
Yeah, and we're going to go into next week about the placement of our son. But we say young, he was 21 months when he came into our lives, changed our lives forever. But again, this is the opportunity for you all to do as much research, dig deep. We've opened up our hearts to you, and our diaries as well. So feel free to drop us a DM if you want to have a chat. And this is what life is about.
Adoption is amazing. It's such it doesn't work for everybody, and we know that from things that we've seen and heard, and people that we know. But that is very, very slim, and I think once you've got the matching process right between yourselves and your social working team, adoption is amazing. It saved my life. I can't imagine life without my child. There's never a moment where I feel that he didn't come from me. It is a blessing. And as soon as you get that child, again, we'll talk about that down the way, but I just want to finish this topic that as soon as you get that child, that love that you get is instant. As soon as we saw the profile on our child, that love was immense. It was no different from you hearing the news that you're pregnant. And I can't stress that enough. It was immense. That's from a woman, let alone from a man's perspective. And
I definitely want to talk about that next week when we're talking about the placement itself. But yeah, for sure. It's
overwhelming.
It's unconditional, isn't it? When you can know that you've got a life that you're responsible for, and something switches in you. I don't know what it is. Higher being, spirit, frequency, God, whatever it happens to be, something switches in you to say, this, you know, I'm going to give this little life the best life I could possibly give it, because for whatever circumstances, it didn't have the start in life that it could have had or should have had. So, so this is definitely a longer journey this time around. If you're still here listening to us, thank you so much for taking the time.
And we're just so glad that people are reaching out. It means so much to us, because it's really, really tough not to cry. It's really tough to having to open up our hearts and let you all know what we've gone through. And people didn't even have a clue that we'd gone through any of this. So thank you so much for listening. I'm so glad that we can help you, and I look forward to continuing this story on adoption with you guys.
Next week we talk about the adoption placement and the day that call came.
Amazing.
Yes. Be prepared for a couple of tears from me, not Michelle.
Yeah.
Have an amazing rest of your weekend.
Have a lovely weekend.
And we'll see you soon.
Take care.
Bye, guys.
Bye.